Good morning, everyone. Good day and good evening for some of you. That was our friend Craig Talman, whose music perhaps many of you know. Not everybody does, but look him up on Spotify. He has graciously given us permission to use his music, since the beginning of the pandemic. And so try to set a nice tone for many things that we're doing. That particular tune was Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach, the welcome of traditional welcome to prayer, both in the morning and the evening. And while this is not prayer, our study is certainly not just plain study. It's study for the sake of the mitzvah of learning Torah. And so perhaps, though we haven't done it so much in the past, we'll just say together, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah. We give praise and we give thanks to the Holy One for this commandment, for this obligation to read and reread, interpret and reinterpret the biblical text and all sorts of texts. And here we are in the second half today of the book of Joel. But, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry, Madalena, did you want to say anything before we actually begin?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, I see a number of faces here or names here that I don't remember from the past. Perhaps you've been here. Our study is quasi-academic study. That is, we listen to the scholars, but we also want to make sure that the text will mean something to us. It is a 4-part series, and one of the 4 parts, the last part, is actually dedicated fully will be dedicated, or is planned to be dedicated to what this text means to us, might mean to us today in 2023, wherever we are in the United States, in the UK, in Mauritius, or if I'm missing out any countries, I apologize, Canada perhaps, what it means to us in our own lives, our own societies. But in order to do that, we've got to finish the second half of the text. The first half, if you weren't able to join us last week or 2 weeks ago, please do yourself a favor and read the first half of the book of Joel until where we're going to begin today. So that would be from beginning of chapter 1 to chapter 2, verse 17. And we're going to finish the other half of the book today. There is a confusion that I don't think I explained last time. We give out a text which is based on the Jewish Publication Society, the new Jewish Publication Society translation, which today is not that new, but it's newer than the one that was done in the beginning of the 20th century. And this division of chapters goes according to what's been practiced in the Jewish world for many hundreds of years, but there is a different order. And you'll see today, no, you won't see, I didn't put it on, but I will mention today that at some point there's going to be a break in how we count the verses. It doesn't matter that much. The verses, as you probably know, the numbering of verses and chapters, it was not in the original. Verses perhaps were. Other kinds of punctuation exist. Not our topic for today, but chapters were a late addition in the Middle Ages. A Christian invention that was adopted by Jewish printers at some point, and there's a divergence today. And you find that in some books, even in Deuteronomy and Psalms, where sometimes you're looking at one, you're using your translation, somebody else is using their probably not Jewish Publication Society translation, and you're in a different place. So hopefully we'll be able to iron that out if that comes up today. But we will be starting in what is for everybody, chapter 2, verse 18 to 27. And you may remember last week, if you were 2 weeks ago when you were with us, that I tried to divide the text. The text was about a catastrophe. And although it's pretty clear that the catastrophe was agricultural, it was so much about the produce of the field and the attack of this 4-prong attack of the locust, and the utter devastation, and then how it had an effect on the people, that is, families. We mentioned elders, children, women are mentioned at some point, not initially. That's an ongoing issue we have in Hebrew biblical text. It had an effect on the temple world, but that didn't seem to be made to be the main focus. Had an effect on not only the plants of the field, but also the animals of the field. And there's a call to do tshuva. There's a call to blow the shofar. There's a call to fast. to make a fast day. There's the catastrophe and a call to tshuva, and the answer for repentance. And the answer to that is in today's text. It's not an immediate answer. It's not like everything is all right and everybody's happy, forever, ever after. But there is as we're going to see, and once again, I broke down, if you're able to look at your text in color. In fact, I think we're going to do what we did last week, which is not what we've done before in our classes together. We're going to throw the text up on the screen, just so we can pay attention, at least in the first section, to the color coding that I kind of ad hoc color coding that I did, which may not exactly correspond to the same colors that I did 2 weeks ago, but you'll get the feeling for different areas of interest of this poet, Okay. So, Joel, and again, for those that weren't here 2 weeks ago, we are reading this prophet as a second temple prophet. There are those that would see him as a first temple prophet. We're reading him as someone who freely utilizes prophetical and other biblical texts that came before him. I'll have a little bit more to say on that in our next section, our next meeting. I think it's in 2 weeks from now. But for now, we will hear lots of echoes. And if you hear those echoes and you'd like to mention them, please go ahead and do so. We're going to read a section at a time. This first section is a large section, and then we'll have some time for reflection and questions and answers. And so please feel free to go anywhere this text takes you. All right. Madalena, could you throw up 218? Are you with us the whole time, or do I need to be doing this?
No, I will be leaving in a few minutes.
Okay, so that I'll get it done. All right. Okay.
Yes.
All right then. Okay. So Philip, would you honor us with reading the first section, please?
Certainly, I am honored. Then the Lord was roused or jealous on behalf of his land and had compassion upon his people. In response to his people, the Lord declared, I will grant you the new grain, the new wine, and the new oil, and you shall have them in abundance. Nevermore will I let you be a mockery amongst the nations. I will drive the northerner far from you. I will thrust it into a parched and desolate land, its van to the eastern sea, and its rear to the western sea. And the stench of it shall go up, and the foul smell rise. For the Lord shall work great deeds. Fear not, O soil, rejoice and be glad. For the Lord has wrought great deeds. Fear not, O beasts of the field, for the pasture in the wilderness are clothed with grass. The trees have borne their fruit. Fig tree and vine have yielded their strength. O children of Zion, be glad, rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the early rain in his kindness. Now he makes the rain fall as formerly, the early rain and the late. And threshing floors shall be piled with grain, and vats shall overflow with new wine and oil. I will repay you for the years consumed by swarms and hoppers, by grubs and locusts, the great army I let loose against you. And you shall eat your fill and praise the name of the Lord your God, who dealt so wondrously with you. My people shall be shamed no more, and you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, that I, the Lord, am your God, and there is no other, and my people shall be shamed no more.
Okay. So I'm looking at the text right now, so I can't see if somebody's raising their hand. Just go ahead and speak up if you'd like to give your questions or commentary. maybe I'll just say a few things to get us rolling. The words that I put in green, like last time, have to do with agriculture or what's growing in the field. You can see how that's all through this section. Grain, wine, and oil, the three basic commodities that were thought to be necessary for life, a regular life on this earth. The beasts of the field, though, are also part of it. The grass, the trees, it's the whole ecosystem. It's not just what human beings plant for themselves, then back to human beings with fig tree and vine at the top of the right-hand column. And then we get this lovely section about rain with different types of rains. Those that grew up in Israel know that a big deal is made about what is the Yoreh and what is the Malkosh, what are the different names for the rains. Some of that we have here. Then back to grain, wine, and oil, just showing how important it is. And on the other hand, you've got this enemy, this presence of an enemy that was at least, but now is on its way out. In the left-hand column now, in the brown, the northerner. Northerner in other prophetic books is referring to the enemy, the actual, flesh and blood enemy from the north, whether it's the Babylonians or others coming from the north. The parched and desolate land, that is part of the enemy, right? And these now we're back to the locust. Even though there's a lot of military language we're going to see today, it seems to all be referring to the locust and not to a real army. Those have said, there have been many commentators over the years who have said, well, this is only, it's a symbol for the real flesh and blood armies. I think it's more of a natural thing. I think most commentaries do. In any case, from whether it's from the Eastern Sea, which is what we call the Dead Sea, or whether it's the Western Sea, which we call the Mediterranean today, the stench and the smell from the rotten locust and larva and all the different things, that's going to rise up. And then if you go across to the other side, consumed by swarms of hoppers, grubs, locusts, reflecting what we saw in the first chapter, right? The great army that I emphasize now, I let loose against you, that's over. That's over. And you're going to know once again that I am the Lord your God. I am providing this. It may very well be our editorial principle behind why they're here as opposed to other ones. But I'm just going to say that in this particular poem, we begin with the Lord was roused or jealous by kana. The word kana, kuf nun aleph, which is it's used for both being jealous and being zealous. And the word roused here is a nice translation because it reflects what it means. God here is not lashing out at the people of Israel because God is jealous that they're worshiping other gods. That's how you often have this modifier of God, El Kana, is often because the people have strayed. But there's other usages in the Hebrew Bible, as it is here, that no, God has an extremely passionate, committed relationship with. Hence jealousy is very connected to that, right? When you're jealous, it's because there's an assumed relationship, intense intimate relationship. But instead, God is motivated to go again and fend for the people whose existence is in danger. And the same way that the poem begins, it ends as well. And my people shall be shamed no more. Jealousy and shame I have a lot to do with each other's, right? All right, I'll leave it at that. Perhaps my people will be shamed no more. Okay, so what my explanation, does that get anybody's juices flowing? Let's you should have the text in hand. If you don't, you can open it up on your computer. It's in the chat box, and I'm going to flip now to our relational screen right now where we can see each other. Comments or questions? Yes, go ahead, Don. Just unmute for us first.
There does seem to be this bond between God and the land, out of which rises a sense of pity for the people.
Was there something else, Don?
No, it just seems like inherent in that love is this great sense of compassion and pity for the people that are struggling with the problem in here.
Yeah, so you know my English is not always so sophisticated because I haven't done much of my intellectual development in English. I've done it in Hebrew, but it seems to me pity feels like a little bit more negative than compassion. Would compassion be the same word for you, Don? And I'm not saying it is. I just in my ears it sounds a little bit.
I think it would. I think they're both emotional responses that are deep.
Okay, great. Phil.
Yeah, I feel a little bit of a dilemma here because it says, I will repay you for the years consumed by all these horrible things I let loose against you. And then you will praise the Lord your God, etc. Now, if this were us, if this were human beings, which is difficult to describe God as a human, obviously, but we would call this not very good parenting. You're sort of over-disciplining and then suddenly, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. This causes psychological damage in human beings, doesn't it?
Yeah, we would call it abuse.
Yeah.
Emotional, parental abuse. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Absolutely. But we've got some other people. Let's see if maybe other people would like to answer from the field, would like to defend the theos in this theological debate. Ria, it's your whatever you want to say. Go ahead. Doesn't matter. You don't have to defend God. Ria?
No, I was not. And it's not even God. It's people who want to make sure that whoever's under them, they're leaders. Moses is in the same position where things don't go right. And since we presented a God that's in control of everything, then we have to find excuses for this God that controls everything and has created everything. And it's the dilemma like in Job, that God created not only good, but evil. So how do you really defend this entity when all the bad stuff comes from this entity? So it's a big conundrum. It's a big dilemma. See, the Greeks created gods, the good gods and the bad gods, but we didn't do that. So I know this is kind of, I don't know what you call it, if you think of it in those terms, that we control how we look at God and what we think of as God. And so that's why these things keep happening. Because what do we do with this?
Right. So I don't want to forget what I'm going to answer. I'll give a quick answer and I'll get right to you. Okay, if that's all right, Sylvia. This reminds me, of course, of the John Lennon song. God is a concept in which we measure our pain. Humanity kind of created God so we could keep track with a measuring stick of how totally screwed we are, or not screwed, or blessed, whatever it might be. One thing that comes to mind is what I learned to say from some of my Catholic monastic friends who were contemplative monks who have an attitude of very much of what I would call a healthy amount of room for mystery. Right? We don't know exactly. We're not concerned with explaining God's actions. But I do want to react, and that, of course, is what Rabbi Kushner did in his famous book as well. We don't know why, but we want to react in a way which will be godly. That's one way of reframing this. The way that I think probably, though, traditionally, from a Jewish point of view, we would reframe what the two of you brought up here, both the abuse and the theological conundrum or maybe ridiculously, is that God needed the people to repent. The people we don't have we don't have that chapter of Joel that says how badly the people were acting, right? We do in other prophetic literature, right? Where unlike Job, where there is no chapter that says the opposite is true, it's framed as a test. But in many of the other much of the Hebrew biblical writings, we have exactly the sin for which the people are being punished. Here, many commentators suggest that we don't have that, what was wrong with society at the time, but they needed to be shook like this. I think Sylvia, you've been waiting for quite a while. Please. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rabbi. Well, two things. One I want to say is I find a big difference between pity and compassion. Compassion, I think, is when I feel something for somebody that I've been through and I want to help them because I know that what they've done. Pity may be, oh my God, he's a victim, but it doesn't affect me much.
Okay, so you're saying
what
God,
I say.
so if I translate to what we're doing, God is compassionate here, but not necessarily pitying.
Right.
Oh.
What I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And also I just want to make a comment on does God, is it God who's punishing us? Yeah, and I'm just coming back to society today, because I believe that we spend a lot of time blaming God for things that we've done. And now we're paying the price.
Right.
There are a lot of people who blame God for the climate change and all that's going on with the end of the world here, I mean, or not. But did we do most of that?
Yeah.
And we don't want the consequences? That's all.
Absolute great point. And Sylvia, that's what's planned for the 4th session of this mini course, is to look at the various things, and that of course is going to come up, but to look in a creative way at all the things that come up in this book and say, so what does it mean to why are we reading this now? Why would we read this from a religious point of view? I mentioned last time we met that this plays only a part of the book of Joel is in the Haftarah. I didn't double check it, but I think only once. Somebody like Dan, I'm sure, can check that for me quickly. I think only once part of Joel appears in a Haftarah. So it's not a hugely popular book when it comes to the Jewish liturgical cycle. But if we read it today, and especially today in 2023, especially where we are with all that's going on with the for good and for bad, right? So yeah, absolutely. But we're going to wait, and what I'm going to ask people to do perhaps is before what I'm asking people to do, and maybe even now, keep a little note and write these ideas like you just shared with us now, Sylvia, and other ideas that come up that we do bring up in that 4th session, so that most of the talking can come from you folks, and less from me. Next time we meet, we'll be looking at the book of Joel in the New Testament, in parts of the New Testament, and in the Jewish liturgical tradition. We may be looking at, if there's time, we'll be doing other rabbinic literature as well. But I'll make a case for why I chose those two things going forward. In any case, but please make a note of it. Yeah. Are there any other comments before we go on? Yes, Don.
Just the idea of roused, being emotionally awakened, possibly with anger. And I think the idea of pity, when I look at God looking at the consequences of what we do on earth, the stupid things we do on earth, I think that would engender a sense of pity that might be different from compassion.
Okay, well, we'll leave that debate up in the air for now, and because all of us are probably bringing that to parental relationships we've had that have been towards us or from us, and it's not by chance that we call God Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. So if there's nothing else, let's go on to the next section. Is that all right? Yes. Did you want to say something, Rita Claire? Is your hand up?
Yes, I was thinking of the statement that was made that God, that evil was formed by God. I believe that was the statement that was made. And I don't agree with that. I don't believe that happened. I think that God created us as free moral agents to be able to make choices and the proper choices. I think of the criminals that was once a sweet, innocent child. So what went wrong? Is it our own imperfections that cause it? I don't think we can blame God for it.
Okay. All right. So let's return. Dan did look up, and indeed, the Haftarah of Joel. It's only part of the Haftarah for Shabbat Shuvah, and it's once a year. But I remember that's only part of it. I think, at least in the Ashkenazi tradition. Okay, then. So Sheila, would you read from us the poem that begins with 3:1-5? And by the way, in the Jewish division of text, it's usually chapter 3, 1-5. But in a non-Jewish Bible, you may have chapter 2, 28 to 32. There's only 3.
Rabbi, are you going to bring it back up on the screen, please?
Yes, of course,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
Details.
Okay, there we are.
3.15.
Right.
After that, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. I know that from Debbie Friedman. I will even pour out my spirit upon male and female slaves in those days. Before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes, I will set portents in the sky and on earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall turn into darkness and the moon into blood.
What, 2 more lines?
But everyone who invokes the name of the Lord shall escape, for there shall be a remnant on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, as the Lord promised. Anyone who invokes the Lord will be among the survivors.
Okay. So Sheila, any initial comment? Tell us about the Debbie Friedman song. I'm not familiar with it.
And the old shall dream dreams, and the youth, sorry, my voice isn't so good this morning, shall see visions. Does anyone else know that song? So
Those that have been connected with the Reform movement might know that song more. Those of us that grew up in the conservative movement were less exposed, but okay, so we'll get to you in a second. Ria, but anything about the text you'd like to say beyond
I'm
that?
just wondering, because I don't know the chronology of this, but could this be either a foreshadowing of the plagues?
So the chronology is very much written in the period of or post-exilic. In other words, it's after the destruction of the first temple, and it's very much after the plagues. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of connections with this text in the plagues, and including that particular verse in red, which I believe is in the Haggadah as well, which we're going to look at in next time we meet. We're going to look and see how Joel affected Jewish liturgy. But you see in the third line of the second column, I will set portents. Portents are plagues, right? I will set moftim and plagues, and of course that word is all through chapter 7 and whatever it is in Exodus, where the plagues are, and in other instances of repeating the plagues in the Psalms, that word moftim is there. So it's very, very much connected. In other words, the author here, the poet, wants us to understand that that something is about to happen, not like what happened before. This is after that. In other words, God is going to pay. Somebody's going to pay the price for what went wrong, which leads us to believe that maybe it wasn't just a natural disaster, but possibly also this poem at least is from a reaction to a military or a political disaster.
Right.
What's nice here is we have the words of bringing in all the family, something we emphasized 2 weeks ago. The sons and the daughters, all flesh is a challenge here, because all flesh, almost everywhere else that appears in the Hebrew Bible or everywhere else, means the ganze Welt, right? The entire human race. But on the other hand, if I take that expression, the ganze Welt, which is in Yiddish, which means literally the whole world, when people, Haredim, use that world, or when our great-great-grandparents were sitting in a shtetl or someplace else and they used that world, they did not mean people in China and Africa and India. They meant the ganze Welt, they meant their whole world. So it could be that's the meaning here as well. In any case, the sons, the daughters, for those that were always looking for the daughters, the old men, the young men, whatever it is, everybody has this potential of prophecy. And that's a really interesting thing. And even the slaves, right?
Well, and that's the one thing I wanted to ask you about that makes me curious. When we know that there are people who turn to the Bible, the Torah, to justify actions, and certainly with all the controversy that's happening about teaching Black history, not having this Black history advanced placement class that's happening in Florida, blah, blah, blah. Are there people who use this to justify, slavery? Well, of course it's okay because it's in the Bible. And look, here, God even bless the slaves. It makes me really uncomfortable to think that it's like that all humans are created equal. Are they borrowing and creating these fundamental documents on the history of our country, of the United States, and yet there's still such
for me, that's one of the dangers or the warnings that I have when we talk about our progressive, and I don't know if everybody here has a politically progressive attitude. I have to be more careful. I may have said this to the group, but a few weeks ago, a woman called about Kabbalat Shabbat in Ora Midbar in Palm Springs, and she said, well, tell me about the congregation. And I said, well, we're a liberal, progressive Jewish congregation. And she stopped me and she said, I didn't ask about your politics. I asked about your congregation. I asked about your prayer. And I didn't even know, I almost didn't know what to say, right? This woman did not show up, and maybe she's even here on screen right now, I don't know. But what I meant to say, I said, I wanted to say, I happen to be extremely progressive politically, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about religiously. So why am I saying this, Sheila? Those of us that prize many of or that speak out for many of the issues today, sometimes we get, what to my mind, too hypersensitive about how it might see it. I would like to take a step back and look at this text as what it says. What it says is the people who were at a lower status, whether they were boys and girls, or whether young, or whether they were male and female slaves, they have the opportunity to have one-on-one contact with God. To me, that's the blessing I see in it. That it's going to be used afterwards by people, as you mentioned, rightly mentioned, for wrong purposes. Well, that's one of the reasons that we study together, right? We study together to say, that may mean that to you now, but first of all, I think that the original text meant something very different. And what can you do? We'll argue, but I don't think we should give up the text. I don't think you were suggesting this, but I don't think we should give up these texts for because other people have misused them. I would say when it comes to prayer, we give up texts that are giving us the wrong values. We absolutely change that's prayer. My difference between prayer is to say what I mean, to mean what I say. When I read, when I study, I can say, oh, look at this. I believe exactly the opposite. I'm going to do exactly the opposite. Okay, let's start. Ria, you've had your hand up, and then we'll go to Yael. Go ahead, Ria.
Okay, so this is a big dilemma, the one I brought up before. So, and I think the prophets deal with this as well, that evil occurs, the horrible things happen, and yet we have an all-powerful God. How can that be? There must be something that we did wrong, and God is punishing us. So this even starts where Moses in Torah, Moses argues with God when God decides he's going to destroy the people. And Moses said, what will the neighbors say? It won't look good. You won't look good. In the book of Job, that the friends speak in a sense for God and say, you must have done something wrong. And God and Satan Satan exists because of God. God created Satan. So then the big dilemma, if God created everything, did God create evil? And so the prophets, this is trying to deal with the concept of an all-powerful, compassionate God, and yet these awful things happen. And how do we deal with it? So each one of these writings take a slightly different track. The people in Auschwitz, where is God? God couldn't be present here. So this is a huge dilemma that we deal with, because we think of God as compassionate, all powerful, and will care about us, me as an individual and our people. And yet look what happens. It's just a depressing look at the thing, but I think it's a reality that exists in all our brains. How can we deal with this?
Thank you. Yael.
And I think we have some flexibility when we're translating Hebrew into English. And that flexibility also can lead to broadening our interpretation of the text. So often avadim is translated in as slaves, but it doesn't have to be. If we say workers, then we have a much more broad interpretation of the meaning of that word.
Okay, thank you. So, something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to allow us in a little different way. When we talk about evil, like Joseph said, what you thought was evil, what looked like evil on the surface led to good. And I'm not saying suffering is good, but I'm thinking of Nadav and Avihu, and I'm thinking of even Korach. So if we look at Korach and we say, if God is benevolent and compassionate, and God says to Korach and all of his followers, you know what, guys, I put you on earth. You're not doing too well. I'm going to bring you home. So maybe it isn't being dashed to bits and suffering in hell, but rather, you know what, on earth, you're not doing too well, but we have to allow for that olam haba. And we do believe that, many of us, that this isn't all there is to life here on Kadura Aretz, you know, on the round earth. So maybe what appears as evil isn't in fact evil, but rather a next step.
Okay, thank you. And it's good that you said many of us may believe in Olam Haba in this group, but in the biblical sense, we don't really have Olam Haba. We don't have anything after death. And so it's what we're trying to do in our study is to see, first of all, what might this have meant? It's a huge might, right? What can we reconstruct in our minds as the original text meant in the time they were read, when they were written and read? And then, of course, which we'll do in the last meeting together, what do they mean to us? Now I know it's impossible to divide, as many of the comments have already brought up. There are things that people are thinking of, they're feeling they want to get out, and that's absolutely, that's great. But I do want to come back to those things in our fourth session. For now, though, we have this almost surreal, or this fantastical kind of the sun shall turn to darkness and the moon into blood. And yes, we could say that's an eclipse and all sorts of things, but it seems to me when it comes to the narrative of the plagues or other miracles, that something very dramatic is being described here. And it is to benefit, in this case, to benefit and to assure the people of Israel who have survived that they will be the remnants, they will be the survivors, as emphasized in the last paragraph. Okay, I'd like to go on to the next section. Okay, Megan, would you like to read chapter 4? Which in other Bibles is the beginning of chapter 3.
Mm. I
Yeah,
have a
put it up
helicopter going around
again.
announcing something here, so sorry.
Put it up on the screen again, Rabbi.
413. For lo, in those days and in that time, when I restored the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will contend with them over my own people Israel, which they scattered among the nations. For they divided my land among themselves and cast lots over my people. And they bartered a boy for a whore. They sold a girl for wine, which they drank.
Okay, some
Ooh.
pretty rough things, right? Things that we don't want to really look about. This came up, once again, it might be something we talk about in the fourth meeting. When do these things happening? What could these be words for happening in our own society? But in this case, though, it is the God of Israel who is turning against the nations here. This is against the nations. So when this happens, when I will restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, and will gather all the nations, this is not the ingathering of the exiles. This is gathering of the nations who have been unfair and acted evilly or unjustly towards the Israelites or / Judeans. I don't think he really makes a difference here because this is just a poetic section. But where he brings them is a very clever place. He brings them down to the valley of Yehoshaphat. Anybody? What does that mean, Yehoshaphat?
Judgment.
What's that?
Judgment.
Judge what? Yeah, it means Yeho, as in Yud He Vav He. God is the judge, so the place of judgment, the valley of judgment. And for here I will judge them. Vinishpatati is the word in Hebrew is vinishpatati, hence the word contend here. It means I will contend with them judiciously. I will put them in a judicial, I and they will be in a judicial relationship. Vinishpatati, imam. So play on words here. And then the restore the fortunes, the gathering. If you kind of go across here, that you gather those who are scattered, our people amongst the nations, who are divided. You restore the fortunes of the people who have been bartered at the most extreme, who have been bartered and sold. Horrible kind of thing, but it seems to be a separate poem, not necessarily related to the one above it, which many scholars have said that it's hard to see all this as one running edited narrative of poetry here. So any comments or reactions on this piece here? Okay, then. Mickey, would you like to read?
Okay, so we're at four.
That's up on the screen, 448.
Okay, actually, it's easier to read on the screen than my printout.
Okay.
What is this you are doing to me, O Tyre, Sidon, and all the districts of Philistia? Are you requiting me for something I have done, or are you doing something for my benefit? Quick as a flash, I will pay you back. For you have taken my gold and my silver, and have carried my precious treasures to your palaces. And you have sold the people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem to the Ionians, so that you have removed them from far away from their homeland. Behold, I will rouse them to leave the place you have sold to them, and I will pay you back. I will deliver your sons and daughters into the hands of the people of Judah, and they will sell them into captivity to a distant nation, for the Lord has spoken.
Okay, so if the first paragraph before this was a general kind of God's turning God's face to the nations, here actually certain nations are being named, right? The ones who live on the coast, going upwards to Tsur and Sidon and the Philistines. And you tried to take all of my gold and my silver, which is on one hand most probably means, you know, the reality of the looting of the temple, but I think is really just a symbol for what comes afterwards. You've sold my people, my gold and my silver, off to the Ionians, the Yavanim, which is the Hebrew translation of the Greeks. In case you're not sure what Ionians means, it's just one of the city states. And so I'm going to give you, it's a tit for tat, all right? Midah keneged midah, lex talionis. I'm going to, what you did to my people, I'm going to do to your people. I saw a hand up, just a second. Stop sharing. Sylvie, did you have a hand up? Go ahead.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm kind of reading this whole text as a comment on what happened after the destruction of the second temple, whereas Lamentations was what happened after the destruction of the first temple. But this is more historical, but not, because it doesn't give us specifics, even when it almost does. So I'm thinking that where you're saying that chapter 3 really isn't, maybe not part of the poetical narrative of 4, or vice versa. I'm thinking maybe it is. I mean, I think that they're all connected.
Okay. And why do you put it so late as a reaction to the destruction of the second temple?
Perhaps because we don't know who wrote it.
Oh, okay. As far as I know, the latest of the people, the people that date this of biblical scholarship is the 2nd century. We kind of went. I think perhaps you weren't with us two times ago, but in the 2nd century BCE, time of the Maccabees, for various reasons, but it's not widely accepted, that particular view. But I would say, though, Sylvie, if you wanted to read this, if you were a rabbi or somebody trying to make meaning of the destruction of the Second Temple, then you could definitely say, well, this is, you know, let me make my midrash. I'll give it a midrashic interpretation based on the Second Temple. Maybe one of the things that could have reminded you is this idea of selling the children into slavery. That midrash that we did in the context, I think, in the summer of Tisha B'Av, from Lamentations, Rabbi, a horrible story about and how they committed suicide together so they wouldn't have to sleep with each other on the ship. So because these are seafaring, so perhaps, but I would say, well, maybe that midrash was based on what's in Joel, instead going backwards. But absolutely, look at this text belongs to all of us, right? And we can. If I think that if we give some good thought to it, and we list the things that remind us and make us those connections, we should go ahead and make those connections. But always remember the key to all our study together is Shivim Panim LaTorah. There's 70 different, right? There's innumerable ways of understanding these texts. Who else on this section? Anybody else? Okay, then. So for the we'll go in for the final, almost for the final. Dan, you want to read for us 4, 9 to 7? I'll put up on the screen.
Proclaim this among the nations. Prepare for battle. Arouse the warriors. Let all the fighters come and draw near. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let even the weakling say, I am strong. Rouse yourself and come, all you nations. Come together from round about. There bring down your warriors, O Lord. Let the nations rouse themselves and march up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit in judgment over all the nations round about. Swing the sickle, for the crop is ripe. Come and tread, for the winepress is full, the vats are overflowing. For great is their wickedness, multitudes upon multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is at hand in the valley of decision. Sun and moon are darkened, and stars withdraw their brightness. And the Lord will roar from Zion and shout aloud from Jerusalem, so that heaven and earth tremble. But the Lord will be a shelter to his people, a refuge to the children of Israel. And you shall know that I, the Lord your God, dwell in Zion, my holy mount, and Jerusalem shall be holy. Nevermore shall strangers pass through it.
Okay. Dan, any comments before we open up for others?
Yeah, well, it turns around the well-known lines from Isaiah. Plowshares into swords, pruning hooks into spears, the exact opposite of what Isaiah says.
Right.
So it's a call to action, a call to martial action.
Right. Very clever, right? If you were looking for interbiblical connections and interbiblical, yeah, this thing that we thought, oh, we're over that stuff already, and it's kind of like, no. Yeah, you went too fast. You reassign the budget lines to peacetime stuff. It's time to bring back the war things. I know the light blue is not really appropriate for war things. It should have been something darker, perhaps, but there's only so many colors you can use that'll play out in this way in print even. But we see again the language, the battle language, but it's mixed into the world of agriculture as way. That's something I wouldn't have seen, for instance, so much, because there is so much about both of these in these poems here. And then again down here. And then finally back to the supernatural kind of issues in the red here. Comments or questions on this? Yeah, please.
This balances out the not by might idea of, we can get what we want just through prayer. This really validates the idea of the militant action is sometimes required. And it is.
Yeah, it brings us back to what most of the biblical texts talk about. We sometimes, again, in the world of Debbie Friedman and the reform movement in some circles, say the conservative movement on the West Coast more than on the East Coast, gross generalizations here, but or more than say Reconstruction in Judaism or renewal Judaism, there is a very strong militaristic underpinnings of Hebrew text, of Hebrew biblical text. That's why a number of us a few years ago, we dedicated about a year to the study of the book of Judges. To my mind, in order to understand modern Israeli politics today, one needs to look back to many more of these biblical texts in a way not done in liberal Jewish North American education. For good reasons. It's not bad, but it's if we want to understand where people looking into their biblical text and living on the hillside where something happened, saying, that's, I want to be part of that, not necessarily part of Heschel or Geiger or Buber, all the different thinkers of the European thinkers of the 19th, 20th century. Somebody else? Anything else on this section?
Donna has her hand up, Rabbi.
Go. I can't see. Oh, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Sometimes when the hand is
Okay.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay. I just wanted to make the connection between what you were talking about before with Debbie Friedman's song, because that song means a lot to me. And I think that it isn't just, it's the song ends up, give us hope, give us strength, give us life. And I think that optimistic view is another take on the swords into plow, everything that we were just talking about. I like the reform viewpoint of strength, and it kind of matches with Israel and the fighting spirit today.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't taking a position, by the way. Please, I hope you didn't understand that. I'm merely pointing out the differences and where different, there's some, yeah. What was it? What is the name of the song? Does anybody remember the name of the song?
Not by, I think it's not by might and not by power.
Oh, there's the same words, even though that's from another prophet now.
But by spirit alone, no. Maybe it's two songs. Somebody else here knows those two songs, I know.
It
Yeah.
might be, this is Rosalie, that the youth shall see visions.
So yes, the youth shall see visions, yeah. Anyway, it ends up, and our hopes will rise up to the sky. Something, and give us hope, give us strength, give us life. Anyway, it is definitely a reform view on taking action and making your own life, making our life better because of our power.
Okay, let's take a look at it and let's listen to this song and see what we get out of it.
As for fantasies, for nursery rhymes and toys, the world was much too busy to understand small girls and boys. As I grew up, I came to learn that life was not a game, that heroes were just people that we called another name, and the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hopes shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Now I'm grown, the years have passed, I've come to understand there are choices to be made, and my life's at my command. I cannot have a future till I embrace my past. I promise to pursue the challenge, time is going fast, and the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hopes shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Today's the day I take my stand, the future's mine to hold. Commitments that I make today are dreams from days of old. I have to make the way for generations come and go. I'll have to teach them what I've learned so they will come to know.
How beautiful. What a beautiful song, beautiful clarinet as well. Lovely. Please don't get me wrong. All this, the utilization of prophetic words, Debbie Friedman was of blessed memory, was continuing in the classical reform movement from the early 1900s, from the early 19th century, for the early 1800s. The early 19th century. From the early 19th century, the reform movement was lifting up the voices of the prophets and to have more weight than a lot of the other stuff which was in more traditional Judaism, of which the Reformation in Judaism was happening. And then comes the 20th century, where Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory, who we just celebrated or commemorated his Yortzeit, his PhD dissertation was on, again, the words of the prophets and what would they mean today. And so don't get me wrong, there's a ton of stuff in here. That being said, there's not only just as much, but there's more of the other stuff, which is less comfortable for us when we read through many of the passages. And that's what we do. We pick and choose, we cherry pick. That's what we do. All Jews, including Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews, cherry pick. I hope everybody understands that by now. At least that's the way I see it. And it's important for us to know what the other side, the opposition to what we are, where they're getting their spiritual fuel from and their inspiration from. I'm going to be going next week. In fact, I think we're not having this class next week. Yeah, I'm going to a conference next week of rabbis that I know that I will be in a very tiny minority from a political point of view, but I'm going to understand, to hear what they have to say and where they're coming from. I think that's crucial to what we're doing now. But again, I've jumped to the fourth. We can end it. We're already at 10:30, but let's see if we can quickly end with the last section from, no, where is it now? There we go. If we can quickly end for this last section. Donna, would you read this last section for us?
Yes.
Sure. Did you say me?
Yeah, Donna, please.
Okay. 4:18-21.
Yes.
And in that day, the mountains shall drip with wine, the hills shall flow with milk, and all the water courses of Judah shall flow with water. A spring shall issue from the house of the Lord, and shall water the wadi of the acacias. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom a desolate waste, because of the outrage to the people of Judah, in whose land they shed the blood of the innocent. But Judah shall be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem throughout the ages. Thus I will treat as innocent their blood, which I have not treated as innocent, and the Lord shall dwell in Zion.
Okay. Any initial comments, Donna, that you have the microphone?
Well, yeah, I guess it ends on a happy note, right? The hope.
At least for some people. Yeah, not for the Egyptians and not for the Edomites. Again, we have this the nature here, the Eretz Chalav, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, the land filling with milk and honey. You can see definitely drawing upon that here. He's drawing upon a common or a known from other prophetic sources prophecy of water coming from the Temple Mount, from Ezekiel, from Zechariah, a section we read on Chanukah, and even watering the wadi of the wadi of the Shittim, Nachal Shittim, the wadi of the acacias. In other words, even to the desert, they don't need watering. They're desert plants, right? So that will be turned around. Yet on the other hand, those that did us wrong will be punished. And let's see, we've got some comments and questions here. Go ahead, Rosalie, please. Just need you to unmute first.
I was going to the wrong thing. This seems so opposite what we do at Passover. And so I find it disturbing, because at Passover, we don't lick our, when we drop the wine, we don't lick our fingers to enjoy what we've done. And this just seems so ugly to me. About what we do, we shall, I forget what the words were, diminish, Edom. It was one of the words that was used. So it's so negative compared to what we do at Passover. And
So I'm going to give you a reality check here. Again, I'm not speaking as to your feelings. I share your feelings, but a reality check from a Jewish historical point of view is biblical text of Joel. That's how much it weighs, right? A late explanation of a custom on a custom even. So the custom is to tilt a little wine out of your glass to diminish because of the suffering of the Egyptians, right? That's the custom. The custom then was to, well, let's leave that, a custom which is not, you know, it has nothing compared to biblical text. And then even adding the licking thing, that's a custom on a custom. That's an explanation of a custom on a custom, which we created, we being liberal streams in Judaism, to to be able to sit with this text and for the text to be more educationally compassionate according to our own values. But you should know in a classical Orthodox yeshivish Haggadah that I used when I was a kid, Rav Moshe Feinstein's son, David Feinstein, who wrote in the halachic notes, he says, and you have to make sure that you fill that cup of wine to the top after you've tipped out some wine, because you're not allowed to say a blessing on a cup of wine which is not fully full, right? Which to me says, hello, you just missed the point, right? But that's the other world. In other words, and so I just want us to try to look in a wide way at the Jewish people, the Jewish literature and practice, to remain with our own values and our own practices, but to see where they fit in with this whole thing called Judaism. Biblical text, and there are so many more texts like this that are not in Debbie Friedman or Craig Talman songs, right? They're not the things that, right? And that are not maybe not so much studied, at summer camp during Parshat HaShavua. Phil, go ahead.
Yes, very briefly, and at risk of straying into week 4, from my visits to the land of Israel, these references to water, it's still a highly political issue and highly contentious between different countries and different peoples. It's a source of a lot of disputing. The movement of refugees from Africa trying to move north into Europe, this is because of absence of water. So these problems are still with us.
Absolutely. Good point. Good point. Okay. All right. Again, please understand that much of what my job I see here is to try to spread out a wide view of the Jewish tradition. Of course, it's skewed because I'm a liberal Jew who went to, who has a yeshiva background, but went to the Hebrew University School of Bible. And so I have a critical kind of methodology. On the other hand, we have a very wide group of people with varied backgrounds. And I mean no disrespect to any of those things. Whatever people grew up in, they should remain in what's important to them. Very often we need to see what our sources say and say, that's exactly what I don't believe in. That's exactly what I'm not going to do. To me, that's the ongoing engagement that I'm looking for. So next week, Rabbi Marsha will be teaching, and we'll get together in 2 weeks from now. Thank you, and keep track if you can. Please read through the 4 chapters, perhaps before the next time, so it'll be easier for us to, especially for the last time, so we can make those personal comments. Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here.